Ever feel like a consultant doesn't know what they're talking about when it comes to operations? You need someone that knows what you're dealing with. That's the experience that today's sponsor, the Breckham Group, brings to the table. Built by operators and engineers, they help you bridge the gap between strategy and execution inside your distribution center. Learn more about how their proven framework called Precision Supply Chain Operations can bring faster performance, greater efficiency, and real ROI at breckhamgroup.com. That's BRECHAM group.com. Welcome into the New Warehouse podcast. This episode is a special bonus episode that originally aired live on our LinkedIn, our YouTube, our X, and our Instagram. So if you are missing our live streams, make sure you are following us or subscribed to one of those channels so you can see these conversations in real time and contribute your thoughts and ask questions as well. This episode is focused on the peak season countdown, making sure your all systems go, and features Brian Kirst of Snapfulfil, which is a WMS, and he is a former 3PL operator as well. He has certainly been through some peak seasons in his time. So let's dive into the episode, and I hope this gets you ready and geared up for peak season. Good luck this year.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
All right, we are live here today with the New Warehouse podcast. And today we are talking about a very timely topic because it is time. It is that time of the year. It is peak season, and we are, we should be underway already, but we're going to talk a little bit about planning and things like that today. So welcome in if you're tuning in, whether you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, or wherever you are watching this from. So welcome in. And if you have any questions throughout the session today, or you have any of your own thoughts or comments as well, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we'll definitely address those. But it's time to get things in order for the biggest time of the year for many in the operations world, especially on the 3PL e-commerce fulfillment side. It is peak, and we are going to be seeing high spikes in volume. And we may have some interesting things happening this year. We certainly have some interesting things happening all year, definitely. So we're going to be digging into kind of the peak season countdown and how to make sure that all your systems are ready, your processes, your people are in place. And we're going to be digging into that and definitely getting some insights from that. So if you have some insights from the audience as well, we'd love to have you contribute those too and bring those on in the comment section. So I'm going to introduce Brian Kirst here, no stranger of the podcast. He's been on a few times, and we recently just were on site together at a 3PL down in Louisville, Kentucky. If you haven't seen that video, definitely check it out on our YouTube channel. It was an amazing look at a full-on WMS implementation, I think from kind of step to step with all the different parties and stakeholders that were involved. But Brian is the Chief Operations Officer at Snapfulfil, and he's also a former customer of Snapfulfil, because he had 2 3PLs before that he founded and exited, and he's also worked for some of the big names in 3PL as well in his career additionally. So Brian, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Kevin. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. You too. Always a pleasure. And Yeah, we're recording this remotely, but we're like, half hour away from each other in New Jersey, right?
We could have done this at a diner in New Jersey for sure.
Yeah, we could have just met at like the diner or something. So definitely. So a pleasure to get you back on here, and definitely a pleasure to have you come on and talk about this, because I think that you've uniquely kind of seen this from multiple sides of the table at this point, right, in your career and your experience. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, let's kick this off. Tell us kind of like your first peak season experience, and what was that like, and what was maybe like the biggest thing you learned at that time period?
We got to go way back into
let's take it back. Let's take it back.
Yeah. I mean, I got started in distribution operations, warehousing, probably the mid to late 90s, in first party distribution. And the first peak season there was, I would say, a system shock for me. We were doing retail fulfillment at a time, you're talking about the mid 90s when automation wasn't top of mind. However,
sure.
Yeah, but this operation was very forward thinking. So we had AGVs, we had a carousel, we had some smart conveyor, and we were shipping hundreds of thousands of units at the time. It was luxury watches, and the peak season was mostly retail. It was e-com wasn't really a thing, but it was a massive peak season for us, an uplift, of close to 100% in volume. And so one of the things that stood out was that really it was a people problem then. It was bringing in labor. Where could we get the labor? But not only that, when we had the labor, making sure that the training was correct and that our management team knew where to go. At the time, I was responsible for inbound. So it was repurposing my staff to assist in the outbound. The inbound processes had died down at that point. So having my team, and they had their specific functions that they were going to operate on in the outbound side, but keeping that thread of communication through the management team, so we knew how to flex resources. We weren't handling a lot of we didn't have dashboards at the time. I remember we had a daily report that came out. It was one of these order reports that was this thick. We called it the hammer report. It came out every morning.
Hammer. Okay.
Yeah, and then an army of highlighters, every color you can imagine. People start highlighting, hey, this is a rush order. This has to get released. And when you think about how easy it is to plan and release orders today, all of those challenges, everybody knew their role and everybody knew what they had to contribute to the ultimate success. So the big takeaway, fast forward to now. When you go through a peak period, and I'm glad I'm on the solution side of it and not on the operation side of it this year, because I can imagine some of the challenges are going to, I hate to use the word, but be unprecedented. But going to what we do now, that thread is very similar. You still need to make sure that you have the right staffing levels, that the folks in your operation, your key stakeholders, they know their role and they're communicating back and forth. And there's really no silo within a warehouse operation. You can't silo out IT. You can't silo. Everybody is going to be part of this peak period solution and a successful peak period. So really the takeaway, and we were extremely successful back in that operation in the mid 90s. I will say, the holder of that hammer report became my co-founder at both of my 3PLs. So we had a 30-year relationship that started in that operation. What we learned then, we kind of took through into successful operations. But really that understanding of everybody knows their role, everybody's communicating across the organization, because ultimately the plan really has to be that your ability to pivot and handle and adapt to change, because this year especially, I think what we expect today is going to be very different from what we actually experience by the end of this next quarter.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and that's really, really interesting to hear, kind of, how it was back then, and how it's evolved as well, and just imagining, a report that big, like you said, to try and figure out like where's the order prioritization, and doing that so manually, like we've come so far, right? As an industry in general, from a technology perspective, right?
In a very short period of time, too.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's really amazing to see. And sometimes I think it's makes your head spin a little bit about how much technology there is now, but it's also very cool to see that. So tell us a little bit, because you mentioned this peak season is going to be unprecedented, as you said there, right? And so tell us a little bit about, before we kind of dive into some of this peak season preparation and things of note to take into account and consider as people plan. What are you seeing? Because right now, you were a 3PL owner, as you mentioned, and worked within 3PLs, and now your customers are 3PLs, right? So tell us a little bit about, like, what are you seeing in the market right now? Like, what are people concerned about? What are they not concerned about? What does the market feel like right now as we head into this peak season?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, and I'm still heavily involved in the 3PL space, my customers, and then just my network in general. Labor is a big concern right now, and labor scarcity going into the peak season, not only from external factors outside of the warehouse, outside the four walls, but even just it's competitive out there, trying to get labor and keep labor. So all of the preparation that has been happening over the year to augment labor, to address labor scarcity issues, whether you're putting in automation or creating efficiencies with your existing solutions, they're going to be tested now. We definitely have a couple of customers within our customer base, and not necessarily just 3PLs, but some of the higher volume digital brands that use our solution. They've been volume testing the system since August, to make sure that they're ready, specifically those e-com digital brands, that they're ready for the push that's going to happen, probably mid-October. Then again, you're going to spike Black Friday, and then in through mid-December to the end of December. Those plans have already been happening. But one of the big things is, how do we handle a spike if we don't have enough labor? Is it pulling from other areas of the organization, which is something, as we talked about my first peak, we did that very often. We had, we pull from, the accounting team and the procurement team, and they're in the sales team, and they're out in the warehouse, and they're packing orders and doing some of the easier thing. And then it's identifying where those areas are. If there is a labor shortage, or there is a situation where maybe labor can't access the building, whether it's weather related or things like that. Who are those critical operators that we need to pay close attention to? People ask me all the time, what are the areas of the warehouse that we should look to automate first? And the knee-jerk reaction is always, look at your picking process. Look at AMRs, look at picking solutions. But the reality is, you can throw people at picking all day. Especially, in certain environments where you have pick zones that are accessible by human resources. It's those certified drivers that can take an operation down, right? And those become your MVPs in moving product, replenishing, put them away. Certified drivers are sometimes overlooked in operations, and I think that's an area that, when you're planning for peak, making sure that certifications are up to date, that anybody who wants to be certified is getting certified, so you have some backups within the operation already. That was something, professional development, offering somebody who doesn't have that certification, the ability to get it. It gives them a career path. It gives that sense of they have some motion, and it also prepares you for a call out. A breakdown, somebody's car breaks down on the way in. Those drivers are key to the operation, and you also don't want to get caught with non-certified drivers operating equipment. So it's things like that. Looking at the labor aspect of it, not only the availability of labor, but do I have the right people trained in the right roles? Beyond that, making sure that as you increase labor, if you're going to rely on temp staff and you're able to adequately staff, that your systems and your processes aren't overly complex, that if a new associate comes in, it's taking them weeks to get up to speed. Time is money. So if you're investing in this labor, you want them to add value to the operation pretty quickly. That was one of the things in our operation, and one of the things really that drew me to Snapfulfil as an operator was sort of the ease of use by a new employee. Sure. And we coined the phrase 15 minutes door to floor. If a new employee walks in,
I like that.
Minutes, yeah, we can have them on the floor adding value to the operation using a very simple RF, because it's all directed workflows. They just really need a tour of the warehouse. This is where you're going to be working. This is the flow of the locations, and then they can usually start adding value by picking or some other base roles within 15, 20 minutes of arriving at the warehouse. So it really helps. You can also quickly judge if somebody's going to have that lasting power. You're not investing a week or two to realize that it doesn't work out, and then you've lost some time there. Or they work a day and then they get another $1 an hour down the street and they bail, and that's the nature of temp labor. So having the processes and the systems in place to make your onboarding process streamlined and efficient is going to really help during that peak period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you got some great points there around the people aspect of it, because, the certified operators is a huge one, right? Because you have, you could throw anybody to pick from the ground, right? Yeah. But as soon as you need a pallet from like the 5th level of your racking, and then no one's around to drive the reach truck to pull it down, you got a problem, right?
Yeah,
and that's a big problem, right? It's like, okay, well, I see the product, but I can't get it. Right. I can't bring it down here. And having that, backup and things like you said is so critical there. So tell us a little bit about, because I think that, peak season is kind of like all year, right? You're planning for peak season in a sense, but you have to be in kind of that mindset as well, right? So what do you see is maybe kind of like the biggest mistake from a mindset that maybe an ops leader has potentially?
Oh, that's a softball, Kevin. it's I've planned for everything. I know It's going to happen. And, I mean, the most unexpected things happen, especially during peak. Peak happens during cold and flu season. So, most unexpected things can happen. Take out your labor force with a nice flu bug going through. Or even, I mentioned a little earlier, just weather. I mean, if New Jersey, which is where we're both based, you can get a snowstorm, you can get a hurricane, you can get things that take out an operation that you haven't planned for. So I think the feeling that you've accounted for everything and you're ready for peak season is would be a big mistake to make. What you want, you don't want perfection. You want the ability to adapt, right? You want to be able to say, hey, I have a plan, but I also know that I can pivot quickly, because, hey, you might have a customer, again, speaking from in 3PL terms, that didn't communicate their marketing plan effectively. And you see they're not one that you expected a 10-fold increase on volume, but then you walk into that. Having the ability to pivot, adapt, and not, and not have a failure on your customer side. So really that, thinking that you have it all planned for. The other thing I think happens a lot when you're talking about 3PL especially is operators can become focused on those known customers, right? I'm processing. I know that my big customer is going to have that huge bump, and forgetting about some of those growing brands that you might have, some of those startup brands, maybe they're in their first or second peak, where they don't have the history that they can provide to you, making sure they don't become neglected or an afterthought, because those peak seasons are extremely important to these growing brands, to these startups. So making sure they have the attention. A lot of times that's why they come to a 3PL to help them handle the changes and the scale. So making sure that at the most important and most critical time in their growth journey, that they're not being neglected because you have other larger customers with history and maturity that they can plan better. So kind of not losing sight, making sure you have all your customers ready and planned for. Those are a couple of things, and just don't use your internal IT as a reactionary force. Keep them in there to be proactive. Make sure we all rely on good internet and good network and the ability to be resilient. Making sure that all those things are covered off on, because the last thing you want in peak season is to have a simple thing like a bad access point or an outage in a warehouse, things like that, right. Because hours, minutes start to matter, especially in those absolute peak times. For a 3PL especially, those minutes, if you're not shipping orders, it's just you're just burning dollars at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's huge, right? That time becomes so critical. And with that time and kind of tying into the second to last point there you had around the smaller brands that you're fulfilling for, like how do you look at that from a priority perspective, and how do you keep the communication lines opening, right? Because if you have one of these smaller brands, all of a sudden they take off, they spike, right? At some point, it's inevitable that you're not going to be able to deliver on probably the same service level that you typically would throughout the year. So how do you make sure that you're navigating that tactfully, I guess I would say.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Are you asking the question, where's my stuff, too often? Whether it's in your own warehouses, from your suppliers, or in your customer network, if you're not sure where your stuff is, then SurgeAir has the solution for you. With SurgeAir's 99.9% accuracy, you're getting more than just supply chain visibility. You're getting the ability to orchestrate your supply chain and guide decisions in real time. Reduce the chaos in your supply chain and find operational truth with SurgeAir. Find your visibility and learn more at surgeair.com. That's surgeair.com.
Yeah, so this goes back to a little bit of what I said earlier around internal communication and folks knowing their roles. So shout out to all the 3PL account managers out there, right? We always said that our account management team, they were an extension of the customer's brand. They were the advocate for the customer internally, and we expected that internally when we were having planning meetings and conversations, that our account management team were really the voice of the customer, and they should push back on us so that their customers get what they need. So making sure internally that communication is happening, so your account management team is communicating effectively and being heard by the operations team, so they can ensure that their set of accounts or their specific accounts are getting the service that they need. Externally, as much as you can, getting an understanding of what the customer is expecting for their peak season. Again, some of the growth brands might not have that history, but I noticed, in my last 3PL, some of the digital brands have such great tools. They know for every marketing dollar what that can convert into in order volume. And we had one customer who was an extremely successful digital brand now that really could tell us, hey, we're increasing our ad spend on the social media platforms this weekend. Here's what you can expect to walk into, and they give us a nice range on Monday. So a lot of these brands have a lot of tools at their disposal to give you some good, accurate insight. The challenge is making sure that you're getting that information and then it's communicating down to the operations team. But really, it's on the operation, to make sure that you're servicing all of the brands. You don't want to miss SLA. So you want to make sure you have those internal dashboards and internal notifications, and you're able to flex your labor pretty easily within the warehouse to say, hey, I need to kind of, balance out the labor so that we're hitting all of the customers. You always have your loudest customers. You're going to hit them first. Your largest volume customers, you're going to hit them first. But the more you can direct those workflows and the more you can kind of prioritize the work and cascade that work through the warehouse, the better chance you're going to have to hit SLA for all your customers. And really just working with the customers to set the right expectation, set the right tone. You don't want anyone to feel like they're being neglected, especially during peak, or that their customers aren't getting the attention that they deserve. With 3PLs, the communication chain is always exponentially loud, right? It's the customer's customer going to your customer, coming to you, and then you going out to your operation. So by the time it gets to the operation, it's probably a very high pitch. So being proactive as much as possible so that you kind of minimize the impact that you might have, the negative impact you might have on a brand, but really trying and having a plan that can accommodate all of the requirements. And, I know there's some providers out there with hundreds of customers, and it becomes a challenge every day. But as much as you have that data, you have those plans in place, and you have those release strategies that work, the peak processing becomes much more manageable. It really comes down to your ability to manage those changes. Again, we're going to keep coming back to it, I think, which is you can have a peak plan, but plan for that plan to change. That is really
yeah. Whatever the plan is, it will change at some point, right?
It will be wrong tomorrow.
Definitely. So it's a very good tips there and information about like how to properly communicate and share that information with your clients and navigate some of those varying levels of volume that can come in there. And so if we look at, we kind of talked about the people aspect, right? Preparing on that side, which is a huge piece of it. But what about from like a physical layout perspective, right? How do we maybe shift the way we look at packing, or shift the way that we're placing items, and how do we leverage some of like the data that we have to be able to make those kind of decisions?
Yeah, so space becomes a really valuable commodity during peak, right? You need space for staging, space for larger operations. You may have kitting operations that exponentially grow during the peak season. So planning for that space as early as possible, because if you need additional space, it's not easy to snap your fingers and it appears. Right. Your space utilization becomes critical. Looking at your solutions, your software solutions, and making sure that you're maximizing the efficiencies of replenishment and dynamic replenishment if your solutions provide that. So you're only replenishing what you need. You don't have product taking up good space and valuable space in forward pick locations that you don't need there. So having, if your systems have that capability, making sure that they're updated and they're working properly before peak. Another thing is around making sure you have the staging areas laid out properly, because they're going to grow. Your couple of pallets, your full truckload for UPS today is probably multiple truckloads tomorrow. And then making sure you have the pickup schedule, so you're churning through those staging areas and those pallets. And clearing those staging areas at a much more frequent pace than you would on a normal day. Most operators, if they're experiencing that peak volume, they're having multiple pickups a day. Making sure those areas are planned for, and then towards the end, as you hit mid-December and you're coming into January, having an area for returns, and starting to think about what that reverse logistics operation is going to look like come January, because your peak outbound becomes your peak inbound in January, and you start handling returns processing on the reverse side for the first couple months of the year. So having that floor space planned out, but not only planned out, properly identified in your software, in your WMS, because your physical layout really has to marry up to your system layout. So your directed workflows are going to work properly. You're not going to end up with orders sitting in places that people can't find, and things like that. So really understanding the utilization of the space, and then making sure it marries up. If you're changing any layouts, that you make sure you make those changes in the software as well. a lot of our operators, we at Snapfulfil, we go out to our customer base usually August, and then again in September, to start asking them about peak season planning. Do you need to add pack stations? Do you need to add additional resources, things like that, so that they have that all prepared, internally, with the system, with the software, printers, and all of that. So planning out that packing area, making sure you have enough stations, enough printers, backup printers, things like that. That all becomes extremely important, but doing it sooner rather than later, and being as modular as you can be in that process. So if you can move it quickly and kind of reallocate it quickly, that's going to be key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that flexibility, like you said, is so important too. And that's a great point about the staging locations too, because that's going to grow, as you said, and then expands more during higher volume. But in similar regard, we talked about, you bringing more people in, getting them trained, and, having more pickers and things like this. What about like from a congestion perspective? Like, how do you plan to alleviate some of that congestion that could potentially be caused by these additional employees?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So another area when you're talking about making sure your system is ready for peak, that's another area. So if your system allows for congestion rules, making sure that they're configured or adjusted to handle your peak processing. So again, Snapfulfil does have those rules, congestion rules. You can set the number of pickers you want in a specific area at any given time. So it'll reroute the work so that you don't create congestion. We also have, the capability to, be able to skip areas. So if an operator comes to an area that is congested and they want to move past that to come back to it, you have that flexibility as well. So again, making sure you understand the capabilities that your system offers, putting those in place or updating them for your peak season is key. So as much of it that you can make system driven is going to do the best. So if your system allows for directed workflows and directed putaways and all of that, put as much of that in place as possible so that an operator, a supervisor, can really look in the system and quickly see where somebody might be stalled out, where somebody might be spending too much time in an area, and then either message over the device or get on a walkie-talkie or take a walk out into the operation, and kind of investigate what's going on there. Is it a process issue? Is it a congestion rule that needs to be updated? And if you can make those updates on the fly, even better. But yeah, having a lot more people in the warehouse requires a lot more thought and a lot more planning.
Sure.
So making sure that you're not creating congestion, you're not creating where people are standing around waiting, because all that wait time, it translates into losses there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really an interesting way to look at it. And you touched on the system side, right? Making sure that you've updated your system and that you have these things in place. And if there are these options, like you said, the skip this congested area, come back to it later, that you've put those in place and put those into your kind of standard work and processes and trained how to do that, right? Which is definitely important. So let's talk a little bit about the system readiness portion, right? Because I think, the last thing we want, right? We bring in all these temps, these seasonal workers, we rearrange our layouts, we expand our staging areas, we add pack stations, we bring out the folding tables, maybe in some cases. One of my favorite tools in the warehouse, I'll say a folding table. But the last thing we want is the system to go down, right? Or something to not work in the system. So how do we start to kind of test and make sure that we are solid from the system perspective? Like when does that portion start and how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces there, right? So as you're adding resources, pack stations, and pickers and things, the first piece is you want to make sure they have the right equipment. So making sure, and again, this is where I don't make IT a reactive partner in this. Bring them into the conversation. If operations says, "Hey, we need 10 more pickers," well, you're probably going to need 10 more devices. If you need 20 pack stations, you're going to need label printers and things like that. So making sure you have the hardware and the infrastructure to support those system uplifts that you're doing. So that's key there. And on the hardware side, making sure you have some backup RF devices, battery chargers, batteries, all of those things that are routinely an issue in an operation. I can't find an RF. I dropped it, the screen cracked or whatever. Making sure you have a few backups there so that you don't have any significant downtime. When we get into the actual system performance and ensuring system uptime, talk to your provider. In our case, we've had several conversations across a lot of our customers who go through the planning process around volume testing. What's our plan, our disaster recovery plans. They're validating our recovery process with us. What are the different SLAs they should be paying attention to? We have our production environments. We also have our test environments and our replica environments that our customers all have access to. So making sure they understand what SLAs to expect out of each of those environments. At Snapfulfil, we're constantly monitoring the resources that are being utilized, and then we can make adjustments in real time to meet spikes in demand. We've already have our peak planning in process, so we've expanded our resources to accommodate where we know there's going to be bursts. If we need to do additional, we'll do that in real time. We're monitoring that 24/7 with our technical team here, and then our hosting partner. So making sure that you're in contact with your provider to understand all of that. And then there's the flip side. There's the local issues, right? Making sure that your network is going to be able to handle the load. Your integrations to your external systems that are feeding your WMS. Sometimes it's not the WMS that can't handle the volume as we've experienced. It's the host systems that can't handle the pushback. So tens of thousands of orders can come in to a WMS, but can that process back out? And can your external system, your host systems, your even your customers, in the case of a 3PL, that some customers and it might have direct connections, are they able to handle their volume? So that's where your internal IT teams start to come into play, and then interfacing with your customers' teams. The network is key, and making sure you're secure. Sure. It is, if folks, if you're paying attention to the news right now, cybersecurity continues to be an issue, especially in the supply chain. We're seeing an increase in attempts to penetrate, the supply chain. There's several operations that were impacted in Europe and in the UK in the last few weeks. And then the airport issue in Europe. I happened to be at Heathrow when that last issue occurred. Yeah. Thankfully, I was one of the first flights out, so I was mildly impacted. But it is still that should be on every IT manager's top of their list, is the resiliency of their internal. I know it's on our radar all the time. We really take it's not an if, it's a when approach to security. So that and I think that should really be everybody's approach at this point. It is top of mind. So resiliency is key, and then just making sure you're ready for the volume.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great point on the cybersecurity. We were just talking about the Land Rover Jaguar thing in my supply chain class yesterday. So, huge impact for sure. So you talked a little bit about on the 3PL side, like what their support should look like from like an IT perspective, and then the interfacing with their clients and customers. But I'm curious during like a peak season, like what does Snapfulfil, a WMS provider, like what does your support side look like for, maybe if there's an issue, they're trying to do something differently, or orders are not flowing through properly? I mean, how do you kind of ramp up on your side for peak as well?
Yeah, so we have a lot of notifications and alerts internally to look at when certain areas of the system are impacted by either volume or an outage and things like that. If it's on the customer side, if they're experiencing an issue with one of their managed integrations, we have our support team. Our support team's 24/7. Most customers have operational support, so it's their operating hours. There are support team. They're trained by us, so they know our system very well, and then they have access to historical data on all our customer systems, so they can see pretty quickly if this is an issue that's come up before, and they can try and help troubleshoot. Now, within Snapfulfil for our customers, we have a series of host interfaces where they can go in and see the exact error messages they're getting or any outages they're getting, things like that. So we do give them the tools to quickly troubleshoot on their own and then determine, hey, is this a Snapfulfil issue where I need to bring Snapfulfil support team in, or is this an internal issue with our managed integrations that we need to then troubleshoot? Or is it an issue with one of our other providers that we need to go out to them? A lot of times, as any of my WMS friends who might be on listening in here, it always goes to the WMS first. If you're not seeing orders aren't closing, things aren't happening, you always go to the WMS first. So our team is pretty good at quickly troubleshooting to make sure it's definitely an issue that resides with Snapfulfil, and then escalating appropriately internally. If it's something that can't be handled on level 1 or 2 support, going to our development or technical teams to get those eyes on it to make sure it's not a broader issue, or pushing back to the customer, giving them the right data points so that they can go externally to their other providers to say, hey, this is what we're seeing within our WMS. Can you check on your side to make sure things are working?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great too. And I love that you're giving that visibility to the customer too, to be able to see some of those things that are going on, to make some determinations on where that issue may lie in the first place, right? Which I think is important, definitely.
Yeah, we're trying to address sort of, there's a large range of use cases or our user base, right? We have 3PLs that have a mature staff and IT resources, but then we have some folks who might not be able to do all of the troubleshooting. So we want to give the right tools to the right people. So where you have deep IT resources that they can go in and kind of take things down the road pretty far, and then come to our support team if they're unable to resolve, that's fine. On the flip side, we have some of those users that are operators. They might not have, maybe they only have 1 or 2 people in IT, and they're focused more on hardware or things like that. Then our support team might have to take it from A all the way on. So we want to make sure that our customers have full visibility so that they can take things as far as they're comfortable, and we're not limiting their ability to really service their own operation. And that's really across the board, from data access. We want our customers to access all of their data when they need it, to dashboards and things like that. It's really important for operations not to get stalled by a lack of access.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you see it that way and want to give that visibility. So we've kind of talked about, some of your peak history, we'll call it there. And we've talked about the people side. We've talked about some of the system side, the layout side, how to think about it from a mindset perspective. So now, we get to kind of the day of, right? Things are about to go crazy, right? These orders about to flow in, or about to be like, we're going to have that second where like, this is amazing for my business. And then we're going to have the next second that's like, okay, I got to ship all this stuff now. Right. So when we get to that day of, right, and we're actually in peak, when we think about, what is the plan of attack, right? You talked a little bit about data here and some of the dashboards and leveraging those, but what are the real kind of data numbers, dashboard metrics, and things that you want to be looking at to kind of keep a pulse on the operation and make sure you're making the right decisions when you need to make those decisions?
Yeah, data is going to be key here, right? Knowing what your KPIs and your standards are going in, what you're expecting your throughput times to be, what you're expecting, your pick accuracy, and I'm sorry, your pick throughput, your units picked per hour, packages, pack station throughput, having those standards going in, and then building those dashboards around it so you can quickly identify pain points. And those pain points don't always necessarily relate to people. They could be process related. Hey, I have the wrong, pick method in here, or the wrong pick path. It's taking too long. It's not what we expected. This aisle's blocked. There was a broken machine or something like that. So being able to get those notifications, and then again, we're going back to, and then being able to pivot and make those data-driven decisions. So data becomes key, but data without anything to relate it back to isn't all that helpful. So having those KPIs and those standards that you're expecting to achieve, so that you can see if you're meeting those pretty quickly, so you can respond quickly. I can't stress enough, having dashboards and visibility, and if you're old school and you need the hammer report, having that too
Sure.
is key to really driving, to an efficient operation. But if those dashboards have to be meaningful, so you should be planning now. What does my, outbound supervisor need to see so he can react? What does the whole warehouse need to see? Making sure, that's another thing. Those screens around the warehouse are great if they're showing the right information. So showing operators how they're performing against standards, how they're performing against each other. A little competition doesn't hurt in a warehouse.
Sure, a little gamification, yeah.
Gamification is great, but really understanding that and having it out there during peak, especially. This is everything, like you said earlier, a lot of operations, this is the plan for this all year. So really pushing out all the things that you plan for around data and what you can, mirror back to your team on how their performance is in real time is going to be key to, they don't want to know tomorrow how they did today. They want to know now how they're doing, how are we operating. And you can't understate the data portion of it at all. A good warehouse operation, director of operations is going to have that dashboard in front of him and quickly be able to say, I'm going to hit my number today or this hour, or I'm not, and pivot. Do I need to move people around? Do I need to change process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so great to have that visibility, but like you said, make sure it's the right things that you want to see, and have the understanding of the employees, the leaders of departments, how do they interpret those numbers, and how do they react when they're going in certain directions and things like that. So I'm curious from your perspective, from like a data dashboard perspective, right? So you just gone through a heavy day of peak, right? It's at the end of the day, or it's probably that night at this point, right? And you're gonna like do an autopsy, dissect that day, and see like, okay, where did we do good? Where do we need to improve? Where do I need to make a change? Like, what are you looking at?
Yeah, I think the initial, goal of every operator is, did I get all the orders out, right? Because again, if you look at it through a 3PL lens, that's ultimately how you ring the cash register, right? So did I ship all of my orders? Did I provide the service level that I promised my customers? And then did I do it efficiently, right? If I did it and my labor cost per order is too high, then I'm going to have to make adjustments going into tomorrow to figure out how to get more efficient. And again, it goes back to that whole being able to pivot. Maybe the order mix was different than we expected, and maybe the cart size was higher. Those type of things. How do we pivot to accommodate that, so that we're hitting that SLA of, did we ship everything out? But did we do it in a cost-effective manner? So those key metrics like labor cost per unit or per order or per unit, either one, those are key and if you can get those in real time and get those daily in the reporting, that's key. And then really looking at, if you want to look at it through the lens of revenue, did we recognize enough revenue today? And if you have some good automated billing within your WMS, you could start to see, hey, this is the revenue we generated from the activities that we produce. It's no different than the seller or the 3PL customer saying, hey, I generated this much revenue today. It was a good day. It's very similar on the 3PL side, because you might have shipped 100,000 orders, but were they all one piece orders? or were they 10-piece orders? Did we do some VAS services? Were these high touch orders where we're doing some kitting, or we're adding extra picks at the pack station, because that all changes the revenue component to it. So being able to have those metrics at the end of the day, that's what drove a good conversation at the end of the day, or the morning, the next morning, with my management team, not only at the 3PLs I operated, but the ones that I worked for. Did we ship out enough orders and generate enough revenue, yesterday? Do we need to make adjustments today? And if you didn't ship out the orders, or you have things that are carrying over, what's the conversation you're going to have with your customer? How do we make that right? And be proactive about that conversation. You don't want a customer calling to tell you that you didn't hit your SLA. You kind of want to get ahead of that.
Yeah. Definitely. That's a good tip there. And so, and then hopefully, after you've done that dissection of the day, you're able to get like at least an hour of sleep, right? At some point, right? So
and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah. And then do it all again the next day. Right. So very great tips here, and really insightful, and kind of how to look at these different things and interpret some things. So if anybody's tuned in and they got a question, feel free to drop them in the comments here. But I'm curious, as kind of a little wrap up question here for you, Brian. I mean, what, like, 3PLs are varying sizes, right? There's small 3PLs that are operating in like 5,000, 10,000 square feet. There's ones that have, 20 different buildings at, 250,000 square feet plus each, right? So when you look at, the varying degree of sizes, what would you say is like one thing that a 3PL, no matter the size, can absolutely just not overlook for peak season?
That's a good question. I think it's going to really come down to two areas, right? It's having your plan and communicating the plan, because you're going to have a lot of new faces, a lot of new hands in it. So once you have that plan, making sure everyone knows what their role is, especially as you bring in temp labor, as you bring in, folks from other areas of the operation organization to take part, making sure it's clear. What are we trying to accomplish? What's the goal here? And that could be an hourly goal, a daily goal. It can change. So I think that's important. It's this year is going to be somewhat unpredictable for folks. I think it's been a rough year in warehouse operations. Planning has been difficult. We see that from our customer base. But I would say the overarching attitude has been pretty positive. Yeah, there's uncertainty, but that's become almost the nature of the business in the last 5 years, right? It's been uncertain. There's been peaks and valleys, but ultimately, it allows people to be creative. It allows for new solutions and new efficiencies to come out. But no matter the size of the 3PL, you're in a service industry, so servicing the customer becomes paramount, and getting the orders out becomes the primary goal. So doing that in as efficient manner as possible with the team you have and the labor you have access to is key. I would say on the tech side of that, for my own selfish purposes, don't blame the WMS for everything. It's really not all our fault. But no, understanding what you have, ask questions of your provider. Can we do this? Can we, is there a feature? Can we make a change before peak happens? In some software, you can make changes pretty quickly. Snapfulfil is highly configurable, so if there's something we can do with the change to rules, we'll do that. And impact the operation that day. So really, if you're unsure of the functionality, reach out to your provider, your account management team, and things like that. And I'm not just Snapfulfil, any software out there, and leverage the technology that you have in your warehouse. If something's sitting in a corner collecting dust, and it's some technology that you haven't used, it may be time to understand, what it really offers the operation and leverage the technology to create those efficiencies so that you can achieve those goals, those revenue goals, those service level goals, and ultimately, grow the organization. It's an important time of year. A lot of brands and a lot of 3PLs, this is where they make their numbers. Sure. Hopefully everyone has a successful one, and looking forward to supporting the folks at Snapfulfil, our customers, and then anyone else that reaches out for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely a great way to close it out there, and yeah, embrace the technology. Like, technology is your friend and will help you. Don't let it collect dust in the corner. Come on, we got to learn how to use that stuff. So really appreciate you joining us here, Brian, and lending us your insights and helping us get it together for peak season, and hopefully having some mutual understanding too of the pain that we feel together collectively, right? Yeah. So really appreciate you coming on, and if people are interested in learning more about Snapfulfil or talking to you a little further, what's the best way to do that?
You can always find us at snapfulfil.com. You can fill out the form there and get a demo of the system, and you can reach me on LinkedIn or through the Snapfulfil website.
All right. Awesome. And we will definitely post that later as well when we put this up as a podcast episode within the next 2 weeks. So if you're not subscribed to the New Warehouse podcast, make sure you do that on your favorite podcast platform. And we will be going live again with Snapfulfil later this month on October 28th. So you can look out for that, and you can join us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, actually X too as well. Today's actually the first day we're streaming on X, and I see we have a couple people listening over there. So thank you for being part of the test on X over there. Hopefully that worked well. And Brian, really appreciate it as always for you joining me here. And go check out Snapfulfil and connect with Brian on LinkedIn. So thank you to everyone tuning in, and thank you to Brian again. Good luck with peak season, and we're right here to help you whenever you need help.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.